And I made it somewhat simple. Now remember, we want to see the similarities between these two stories, these two families, the father and son and his father and his son. There's definitely a lot of similarities. I try to make it simple, really, really simple. A couple times it's a little deeper because God's deep. But right here you'll see it's pretty simple. Now both fathers, they both honored their boy. And as you can see here, Jacob honored his son, Joseph. And it says about Joseph in Genesis 37, verse 3, it says, "Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children." Oh, of course he does. And you can look at this. Here's Jesus. "This is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased." So this is just one little similarity in the two stories. Real simple similarity. Both fathers honored their boy. Now what about this one? Both had robes of significance. Did they both have robes of significance? Certainly one. Let's look at Joseph. Genesis is verse 3. Now we're kind of going through Genesis 37, 38, and each verse pretty much. And it says that Isaac loved Joseph, and he made him a coat of many colors. And you can see the many colors on his coat there, which is quite amazing. By the time we get towards the end of the message, we'll see some very interesting things about this coat. Very interesting. And Jesus, not the most, the best picture of our King, but most definitely that is what happened. And it says that he was wounded for our transgressions, and with his stripes we are healed. And so the similarities here, different ways of looking at it. But one, most certainly, the stripes that he wore on his body, his very body, definitely can symbolize that amazing coat that Joseph had, which may have been stripes or many colors. And we'll see later that, in fact, it probably was a striped, many-colored coat of Joseph. And so let's look at another one. This is another way of looking at it anyway. "And Herod with his men of war, they set Jesus apart, and they mocked him, and they arrayed him in a gorgeous purple robe. And they sent him again to Pilate, put a robe on him because he's a king, but they were mocking him." It's wild because, Joseph's brothers, they mocked him all the time, and they were envious of him. They wanted to be like him. So anyway, this is gives you an idea, There's definitely a lot to look at. If you were going to look into it deeper, I'm sure you'd find more amazing things. Here's another simple one. Both were hated and they were envied without cause. Most definitely. And there's Joseph. He's got his little coat on. And it says, "And when his brethren saw that their father loved Joseph more, they hated him." So you can see he loved Joseph more, and so they hated him. It's as though they were envious, and so they hated him. And isn't that similar to what happened with Jesus? It says that then the chief priests, they delivered Jesus for envy. The same story, just replayed in another family, another life, told by God, by envy. It's amazing. They delivered Jesus for envy. He had something they didn't have, and they wanted it, didn't know how to get it. This is what Ellen White says. This is going just a little step deeper. This is about Satan. And he was most definitely envious, wasn't he? She says that when Satan learned the purpose of God, he was envious at Christ and jealous because the Father had not consulted him in regard to the creation of man. Isn't that wild? Our planet, created just to resemble perfectly God and his Son. It's us, you and me, your husband, your wife, Adam and Eve, God and his Son. And Satan didn't like that. That's what it says. And so he was jealous because the Father had not consulted him in regard to the creation of man, because we were created in the image and the likeness of them too, huh? So she says the envy and the jealousy of Satan had increased until his rebellion. All heaven was in harmony and perfect subjection to the government of God. But Satan, he commenced to insinuate his dissatisfied feelings to other angels, and a number agreed to aid him in his rebellion. Now, isn't that interesting? It's the same thing that happened in Joseph's story. His brothers, they all came together and said, yeah, let's sell him off. Actually, it was first, let's slay him. Let's all just slay him. Throw him in the pit, kill him. But then they decided to sell him. And basically that's what happened with his own people and his own church. It's amazing. Let's look at another one. Both fathers, they gave them flocks to tend as shepherds. Yes, they did. This one's fun. This is verse 14. And he said, this is talking about Jacob, he said, go, I pray thee, Joseph, and see whether it be well with thy brethren and well with the flocks, and bring me word again. So it says, go ahead and go on out there, Joseph, and see what's up with these your flock, and also see what's up with your brothers, you know. Okay, well, that means Joseph, well, he was a shepherd, right? Yeah, he was a shepherd. Look at Jesus, and it says that Jesus answered, and he says, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. They're both shepherds. They both have sheep. And we are his sheep, huh? Yeah, he tends us. Another little tidbit here, just one tiny step deeper. If you go and you look at the story of Joseph, and you see that verse up there, verse 14, you know, how Jacob said, go to your brothers and see how they're doing, and see how the flock is. Well, there's a story that Jesus tells about the owner of the vineyard. And it's Jesus says, then said the Lord, I will send my beloved son, that maybe they will reverence him when they see him. You know, he says, this vineyard owner, you know, I sent my servants, I sent all these people, and they killed him. But certainly, if I send my beloved son, they will reverence him. Same story with Joseph. Jacob sent him to his brothers, but immediately when they saw him, they started conspiring. And immediately, with Jesus, the same thing happened. God sent his son, and they killed him. Just the same story. Wild. Then they reasoned among themselves, saying, this is the heir, come let us kill him. Yeah, that's up in Luke 20 there. So it's the same story. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. How about this? Both were wanted dead. Okay, this is the very next verse for Joseph here. In Genesis 37:18, and when his brothers saw him, what did they do? Saw him afar. They're looking out there, and they see him, and they conspired against him to slay him. That's really mean. Maybe they thought he was obnoxious. I don't know. But he was certainly a blessed young man, and they were envious. Same with Jesus. Then assembled the chief priests, the scribes and the elders and the Herodians and the high priests, and they consulted that they might take Jesus by subtlety and kill him. So it's very similar to what happened with Joseph. When they saw him afar, they conspired to kill him. You know, it's the same over here. They're afar, they're with subtlety, how we might kill him. They all reasoned among themselves how they might kill Joseph, how they might kill Jesus. The same story again. Both robes, they were stripped away. Wow, they were both stripped away. And it says, and it came to pass that when Joseph was come unto his brethren, that they stripped Joseph out of his coat of many colors that was on him. That was really mean. What about Jesus? The same thing happened to Jesus. Then the soldiers of the governor, they took Jesus into the common hall. Wow. And they gathered unto him the whole band of soldiers, and they stripped him. They stripped Jesus. So there it is again. All the brethren together stripped Joseph. And down here, all the band of soldiers stripped Jesus. That didn't look very fair. But it represents a true story. Very true story. Now what about this? Both betrayed by the same brethren. Now this is a really fun one. This one gets interesting. They were both betrayed by the same brethren, most certainly the same people around them. And it says in verse 26, and Judah, he said unto his brethren, says, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites. And his brothers agreed. Okay, let's sell him. Makes more sense. It's more profitable. What about Jesus? Then one of the 12, they called Judas Iscariot, went unto the chief priests, and they said, what will ye give me, chief priests, if I deliver Jesus unto you? Both betrayed. Very interesting. By the people they love. Joseph by Judah, and Jesus by Judas. Very interesting. Now, you might wonder, you got Judah and Judas, and they sound similar. Is there anything there? And we can look a little deeper here. It's really interesting because you might see the similarity, Judah and Judas, and a lot of people, they think maybe, hey, Judas of Iscariot is of the tribe of Issachar, but in fact, if you look at it a little closer, there's another possibility. Judas Iscariot. It's actually Greek, I believe. Iscariot actually translates into Hebrew as Ishkarioth. So it says Judas Ishkarioth is what Judas Iscariot means. It's pretty wild. And there's no significance in that except that Ishkarioth actually means Judas of Kerioth. Okay, so that doesn't mean anything, right? But if you look a little further and you go and you look in Joshua 15, verse 20, you'll see that Judah, the descendants of Judah, they inherited the land of this place called Kerioth. So indeed, Judas was actually of Kerioth. Judas Iscariot. It's like this: Judas Iscariot, or Judas Ishkariot, basically. So what you have here is Judah betrays Joseph, and down here you have Judas of the tribe of Judah betraying Jesus. Pretty wild. But that's a possibility. It looks that way. You might look into it a little further, though. Pretty cool. And if we look over here at this slide, we see that both betrayed by the same brethren, and the plot thickens. So this is a little deeper. We have the Judas, who's of the tribe of Judah, betraying Jesus, but then it gets a little deeper, darker actually. What we have here is, it says, there's an even deeper parallel here. Jesus was not only betrayed by his own blood on earth, he was first betrayed by his once heavenly, and I said brother, loosely, Lucifer. This is one way of looking at it. It's just an idea. You can take it or leave it. So how was Lucifer Jesus' brother in a manner of speaking? How was this the case? These are my thoughts. Remember that. Colossians 1:15 says that Jesus, the firstborn of every creature, for by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in the earth, and the visible and the invisible. All things were created by him, Jesus, and for him. And he is before all things, and by him all things consist. So it's just a wild thought. If it just happened to be that God was in the beginning, begat his son, and what if by some wild chance it was Jesus who created Lucifer? It's just a thought. It's only a thought, though. But either way, they were very good friends back in the day, I would imagine. Close as brothers, possibly, right? And if you go look a little further, you see why I'm even going into this. This is my thought. Is it likely that Jesus created Lucifer? He would certainly be jealous if, they started creating a planet in the image of just God and his son instead of God, his son, and Lucifer. If so, being the third most important in the universe, if he was, he was very jealous when they created the planet in the image of the two instead of the common understanding of the three. We are very distinct in this manner. And that in Genesis we were created in the image and the likeness of God and his son. He sat up there, he said, "Son, let us make man in our image, in our likeness." Adam and Eve, husband and wife. It's really a beautiful picture. He writes an amazing story. But if we go a little further, now the Feast of Unleavened Bread drew nigh. That's right now. Which is called the Passover. And then Satan entered into Judas Iscariot. So we're seeing something a little further here. We're seeing that indeed Judah betrayed his brother Joseph, sold him. We're also seeing number 2 that it was Judas of the tribe of Judah who betrayed Jesus. And then we're seeing the plot thicken and that it was Satan who entered into Judas Iscariot. So it was actually so deep that it was like Jesus' own flesh and blood, his own brother in heaven that betrayed him. And we know that was basically the case as they all screamed, "Kill him," in the crowd. How was Jesus so confident also? This is my thought. To say to Judas, "Whatsoever ye do, do quickly, Judas." Sitting there, Did Jesus know these prophecies among all the other prophecies? Did he know the prophecy of Joseph? He knew it. He amazes me. He knows stuff that I just don't know. I think maybe he knew. And I think Lucifer was a very, very good friend who betrayed Jesus. Both sold for similar amounts. Now, this is just another fun little thought. How much was Joseph sold for? Anybody remember? A little bit of silver, yeah? 20 pieces of silver, huh? Yep, you're right. Let's look at it. It says that there passed by a Midianite merchantman, and the brothers they drew, and they lifted up Joseph right on out of that pit, and they sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. 20 pieces of silver. There he is right there. Bing. And here's Jesus. But it says that Judas and the high priest, they covenanted together for 30 pieces of silver. And I don't have an answer for why the discrepancy. Inflation, yes, inflation. I don't know. And I looked and I want to know, Lord, I want to know. Because there is a reason for all the significant little tidbits in the Bible. He wrote one book, one amazing book, and every little tidbit in there is in there for a reason. Similar amounts, most definitely. They both got their little bags, you see. Okay, let's look at another one. Both robes, they were bloody. Well, this is another fun one. Very interesting. Both robes were bloody. Joseph, in Genesis then, this is verse 31, and they took Joseph's coat, and they killed a kid of the goats, and they dipped the coat in the blood, and they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father, and he mourned. It was an awful thing to do. Very awful. Look a little further, and we see that there was also another coat dipped in blood. In Revelation, his eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were the many crowns, and he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood. And his name is called the Word of God. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. Now, there's another interesting aspect here in that the kid of the goats. You look in Leviticus, and they would offer a kid of the goats, I believe for the sin offering. And so it's just wild that it just happens to be a kid of the goats that they offered, that they killed, and they stuck Joseph's coat in there, made it all bloody. It's because God wrote the story. And he writes amazing stories. And it means something, the kid of the goats that they dip the coat in. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's look at another one. Both fathers grieved. This was a little extra tidbit. But it's true. I mean, it is. And this is about Joseph. And they sent the bloody coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father, Isaac, who mourned. It's very sad. I mean, Jacob. There you go, Israel. It's not quite right, huh? They brought it to Jacob, and he mourned. You should have seen before I had Isaac all over this thing. And for some reason, I edited it, and yet it's still there. But you get the idea. It's Jacob and Joseph because it's his dad, right? Okay, now let's look at God in heaven. This is Ellen White. She said something about God. She says, quote, "Said my angel, think ye that the Father yielded up his dearly beloved Son without a struggle? No, no," the angel said. "It was even a struggle with the God of heaven, whether to let guilty man perish or to give his darling Son to die for them. The transgression was so great that an angel's life wouldn't even pay the debt. I also saw that it was impossible for God to change his law in order to save the lost, perishing man. Therefore, he suffered his darling Son to die for man's transgressions." It's wild. It's so true. But they both, in their own ways, grieved an all-knowing God. He didn't want to. It was a struggle. Didn't want to. Wow. Same story again. Here's another one. Both went from royalty to servant. Ooh, they sure did. Look, there's Joseph and Jacob. There he is. He's young. His father loves him. He's like his most honored, cherished boy. And then it goes over here. Joseph ends up getting sold and gets passed around and whatnot. He ends up becoming a servant who then works for Pharaoh and Pharaoh's officers, Potiphar. And look at the verse here in verse 1. "And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and he was in the house of the Egyptian Potiphar." And then we can look at Jesus here. You know, they both went from royalty to servant. And in fact, they both went from royalty to servant back to royalty, huh? Yes. Here's Jesus right there, right-hand man. And there's his dad, his Father in heaven, our God in heaven. He went from that to that. What we were doing earlier on Passover, washing feet. It reminds us of the mighty things our God has done, coming from that and going to that. Washing these dirty feet, which most of us don't even have, you know. And it said, being in the form of God, made himself of no reputation and took upon himself the form of a servant and was made in the likeness of men. A right-hand man, prince of the entire universe, coming to this planet to wash stinky feet. That is amazing. Would you do that if you were prince of the universe? Wild. Now, both tempted. This is also interesting. They were both tempted. We know they both were. And what do we have here in Joseph? It says in Genesis 39, verse 7, "And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph. And she said, 'Lie with me, Joseph.'" He didn't want to do it. He just didn't want to do it. They were tempted. Here's Jesus' temptation. These are some temptations in the wilderness. Very similar in that, you know, they were offered something they wanted. They could have desired somewhat. "And the devil said unto Jesus, If thou be the Son of God, then command this stone that it be made of bread." Jesus, there he is, with the word of God. Well, actually, it's his words, huh? He says, man does not live by bread alone, but by the words that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. And here's another one. The devil took Jesus to a high mountain, and he said, all this power will I give thee, if thou therefore wilt worship me. And Jesus said, nope, I'm not going to do it. Brought him to Jerusalem, set him on a pinnacle of the temple, and he said unto him, Satan says, if thou be the Son of God, cast thyself down from hence, for it's written, he shall give his angels charge over thee to keep thee. No, I'm not going to do it. Don't tempt the Lord your God. Nope. He knew very well. In a way, he knew him very well. Look at another one. Both resisted that temptation. Here it is, Joseph. But he refused that temptation from that wife. And he said unto his master's wife, neither hath my master kept back anything from me, but thee, his wife, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? I won't do it. And he walks away. Says, don't linger. Run. Yeah. And it says here about Jesus very similarly. And Jesus answering, he said unto him, it is said, thou shalt not tempt the Lord thy God. And when the devil had ended all the temptations, he departed from him for a season. Because he likes to come back. He most definitely likes to come back. That's why you don't want to linger, huh? He'll bug you and bug you. They resisted. And most definitely, he was in all points, as it says, tempted like as we are, and yet without sin. He didn't give in. He resisted. And we can do the same. So submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you, too. Let's look at another one. Both were cunningly apprehended. Now, this is fun. Yeah. Here's Joseph. And there was none of the men of the house there within. So then she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. Nobody's here. Let's do it. Very similar to what happened in Jesus' time. In Gethsemane, Jesus said to the multitudes, are you come out as thieves, or against me as a thief with the swords and staves, for to take me? He says, I sat daily with you teaching in the temple, and you laid no hold on me. Every day I was out there. It's just the same in the story of Joseph, you know. Nobody's there. It says none of the men of the house were there within. So then she took him. She said, I'm going to get him right now. Same in Gethsemane. They come out at night to get him because his followers weren't all around. Same story. Here's another one. Both accused falsely. Okay. She called unto the men of her house. This is the wife. And she says, and spake unto them, saying, see how, what does it say? He hath brought in an Hebrew unto us to mock us. And he came in unto me to lie with me. To lie with her. Is that the case? Keyword lie, because, you know, she wanted him to lie with him, but she lied. She did lie. Oh, boy. It says about Jesus. At last came two false witnesses against Jesus. These are the false witnesses. You know, up there, they're lying. They're deceiving. She's lying about it. We're just talking about lying about what happened in the situation. And down here, they bring false witnesses against Jesus. If Satan can't get you one way, he's going to get you another way, huh? But God was with him the whole time. God was also with Joseph the whole time. And they became greater than Satan would have ever wanted them to become. Both prophesied the same for two criminals. Now, this is also a really fun one. Both prophesied the same for two criminals. Okay, let's look at this one. This is about Genesis 40, verse 12. This is Joseph. Remember, he was in prison, and there is a cupbearer. This is his dream. Here's the cupbearer's dream. This is the interpretation of it. The three branches represent 3 days, Joseph says. And within 3 days, shall Pharaoh lift up thine head and restore thee unto thy place. Joseph says, hey, you're in prison, but in 3 days, you're going to be restored to your position as cupbearer. He says, no, whatever, you know. And then there's another guy in prison. You remember the other guy? What did he do? He was the baker, cupbearer and the baker, and Joseph in prison, all in prison together, 3 of them. And this is what the baker's dream was. This is the interpretation, Joseph says, thereof. The 3 baskets are 3 days also. Within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head from off thee, and shall hang thee on a tree, and the bird shall eat thy flesh. I know he didn't like that. But in fact, these 2 characters were the main characters in this story. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, 2 nobodies, a cupbearer and a baker, and Joseph. And we'll look into that. Let's look a little further and we'll explain it a little more. And you can see there the tree regarding the baker. You know, he was going to lift up thy head from thee and shall hang thee on a tree. You know, is it a noose? Is it a cross? What is it? I'm not sure, but let's look at it. And there were also 2 other malefactors led with him to be put to death. With Jesus, remember that? The 2 guys, maybe on both sides of Jesus, one criminal, another criminal, and Jesus. Malefactors led with him to be put to death. Luke says in 23:39, and one of the criminals, the malefactors, which were hanged, railed on Jesus, saying, if thou be Christ, save thyself and us. Save us. We're up here on the cross. We're dying here. Save us. And the other criminal answering, he rebuked him, saying, dost not thou fear God, seeing thou art in the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds. But this man, Jesus, hath done nothing wrong. And he said unto Jesus, that man on the cross, Lord, remember me when thou comest into thy kingdom. And Jesus said something very comforting. He says, verily I say unto thee today, he says, thou shalt be with me in paradise. Amazing. So we look at it a little closer here. We see the 2 guys up on the top. Imagine 3. There's 3 guys in prison. You see the 2 prisoners and Jesus. They're in prison together. And then they went to the cross together. Compare that with the upper story of the 3. Joseph and the cupbearer and the baker. These are 2 coinciding stories here. 3 and 3. And there's one chosen, Joseph, and another one chosen in the other, Jesus. And when you look at this, it is amazing in that, let me read a little bit here. What's so interesting is that we have the cupbearer who is restored within 3 days. It says, within 3 days shall you be restored unto thy place, Mr. Cupbearer. He goes back up there as restored. But the other one, the baker, he, within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head from thee and hang thee, and the bird shall eat thy flesh. One goes back to his position. The other one doesn't. He dies. In this same aspect, you see the same story played out in Jesus' day with the one on the one side who was hung on a tree and his head is lifted up. He dies on that tree. He doesn't go to heaven. He's not redeemed. He doesn't, he doesn't ask forgiveness. He didn't repent. There you go. He doesn't repent, just like the up there with the baker. And so you see the same story played out here with the man on the other side who says, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And within 3 days, what happened? That cross on Passover, which is tomorrow. Then he rested, and he rose on first fruits. And what happened to Jesus? He rose on first fruits. And what happened to the cupbearer within 3 days? The same thing happened with the cupbearer story. That within 3 days on the top says that Pharaoh will lift up thine head and restore thee. Within 3 days. What I'm saying is that the stories perfectly mingle together in that there's two criminals. The one is saved. The one is restored to his position, just as the other one is asked repentance. He's repented. So anyway, what you have here is that they both coincide perfectly. Where's my thoughts here? So anyway, you have Jesus and Joseph perfectly representing each other, and you have the two criminals perfectly representing each other. And the bigger picture is that on first fruits, the one, if it represents the man on the cross, if it perfectly represents the story of the cupbearer who was restored to his position after within 3 days, that the man on the cross was also restored to life within 3 days. What I'm saying is that when Jesus rose on first fruits, that maybe that man also rose on first fruits among many others, because the stories fit so well together. And there's a lot of stuff there, but when you look at it, they perfectly mesh together. So you can look at that a little more. Okay, let's move on. And that it says, this is what I'm saying. And what did he say before going to the cross? This is amazing too. This is just another tidbit. It says that there's no greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. And there he was on the cross, and he laid down his life for even a criminal on the cross. Surely thou shalt be with me in paradise. Let's look at another one real quick. And there's some fun ones at the end. I kind of mangled that one, but you know what I'm saying. But anyway, here's another one. Both give all glory to their God. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, It is not in me, he says. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace for your dreams. He gives the glory to his God. Also, with Jesus, it says that, For I have not spoken of myself, but the Father which sent me, he gave me a commandment, what I should say and what I should speak. In the same way, they give glory to their Father, their God. Most certainly. First Timothy says, there is but one God and one mediator between God and man, the Christ Jesus. And this is the other aspect here, in that they were both mediators, weren't they? Christ is our mediator. He's the only one, it says, between God and man. He is a high priest right now, mediating for us between God and us. Same with the story in Joseph. Pharaoh had a dream. Nobody knew what the dream meant, so he had to have a mediator to interpret it. So Joseph said, God shall give Pharaoh an answer through Joseph, the mediator. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Both restored to second in command. I'm sure we're getting towards the end here somewhere. Both restored to second command. Here's one. This is Joseph. And Pharaoh said, Thou shalt be over my house, and according to thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than you, Joseph. He was second in command. Reminds me of somebody else. How about this guy? Says, And now, O Father, glorify thou me with thine own self, with the glory which I had with thee before the world was. And there he is. He was restored to his position, right-hand man, right up there with his father, the king. Both are given new names. This is a fun one too. Says that, and Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphnath-Paneah. Does it mean anything? Well, it actually, if you go and look into it, it can mean preserver or creator, like sustainer of life. It's interesting because he most certainly was. After all that famine, he sustained the whole country. And it says about Jesus, a new name. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, and he had a name written that no man knew but he himself. New names. We get new names too. It says that him that overcometh will I write on him my new name. A new name. Isn't that just a coincidence? No, it's not a coincidence. Not a coincidence at all. Let's look at another one here. We're going to get to a really fun one you're going to really like. This is also another thought. To him that overcometh will I give a white stone, and in that stone a new name written, which no man knoweth but he that receiveth it. New name. New names all around. They're very meaningful. There's a reason Joseph got a new name. In fact, Daniel and his friends got new names. Everybody gets new names, right? It's because it's a new kingdom. It's a new authority. This is the name I will give to you now. Amen. Now we're going to look at the brides. And Pharaoh called Zaphnath-Paneah, and he gave him to wife Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. So here it is. It says that Zaphnath-Paneah, Pharaoh basically gave him this wife, gave Joseph this wife. It's very interesting because it's very similar in the end of time with the story. Remember the story of the wedding feast? It's God's wedding feast for his son. And he calls everybody. But not everybody comes. But it is him who calls that bride. It is God who offers his offering so that we can be saved. It is God who gave his only begotten Son. He loved us so much. In the same way, Pharaoh gave Joseph that wife. And none other than the daughter of the priest, pagan priest. But, we're supposed to be a holy nation, a kingdom of priests. I'm sure there's something that fits there. Jesus, it says, and there came unto me one of the 7 angels, saying, I will show thee the bride, the Lamb's wife. And he carried me away in the spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me that great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God. And who's in that city? Yeah? Yeah. We're in that city. Matthew 25. We'll definitely be in that city. So we are the bride, just as in the same story with Joseph. He receives a bride, and Jesus receives a bride. And he shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and an holy nation. Yes, we looked at that. Both are knelt before. Yeah, both are knelt before. It says, and Joseph was the governor over the land, and he it was that sold to all the people of the land. It was Joseph who sold everything. And Joseph's brethren came, and they bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth. Now all the land came to him. All the land bowed to him. In the same way, all the land, all the universe bows before Jesus too. That at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow, of things in heaven and things in earth and things under the earth. Absolutely everything. At that time, Egypt was a great place. I mean, it was a massive place. It was like the world, Yep, it fits perfectly. Both were the bread of life. Oh, we're getting towards the end here. This is going to get fun. Both were the bread of life. It says that all the countries came into Egypt to Joseph to buy corn, because that the famine was so sore in all the lands. They came to buy corn. For what? Bread. Yeah, bread. Anybody like cornbread? I love cornbread. Oh, and when they put sugar in it, boy. Oh, boy. Cornbread. They had to have it. They had to have the cornbread. And it says about Jesus, he is also the bread of life. It says that Jesus said, I am the bread of life. He that cometh to me shall never hunger. There they are, coming to Joseph, because they're hungry. But when they get there, they're no longer hungry. Just like Jesus, the bread of life. No better time to remember that than today, Passover, this evening. The bread of life. Wow. What about the living water? Got to have both. Can't live without both. You got to have both. Both are the living water. Here, let's look at this. Jesus not only said, I am the bread of life, but also the living water. He that believes in me will never thirst. That's right. He is the living water. What about Joseph? How is Joseph the living water? How in the world can he be the living water? He not only provided the bread of life, but also the water of life, the living water. Let me tell you what. If he wasn't there, they would have died. Okay. If you look at this, you can see a canal there. This is out in the middle of nowhere. There's desolation, just wilderness on both sides. You see it? This is a canal that feeds from a place. This is what it looks like. This is what it looks like out there, and this is what we're going to look at. The Fayum Oasis in Egypt. It's really, really nice. And it's called an oasis for a reason, because it's so green, and pretty, and lush. But it's out in the desert. Why in the world do they have this beautiful place out in the desert? Why is there an oasis out there? Let's look. Well, as it said on the top, Jesus said, he that believes in me will never thirst. Joseph's got to fit in there somewhere. Indeed. You see the top? The blue. That's the Mediterranean Sea. And you see the green? That's the Nile Delta. Egypt. It comes down. You see that little line? The green line down the middle? That's the Nile. That's the Nile. It's all desolate out there, isn't it? There's nothing out there. And then you see that little speck, the little round circle of green, kind of towards the middle of the screen. And that place is called Bahar Yosef. And it's actually a very large place. That place there is actually 700 square miles of green and tons and tons of people. Tons of people. Some 400,000 acres. It's big. So you have the Mediterranean Sea. Feeds the Nile up there in the big green. It's beautiful up there. And then the Nile flows down. And as it flows down, you can see a little closer here where that Bahar Yosef, where it says that. You see a little closer. And it says, you can see the Nile coming down there, and you can see the place there called Fayum Oasis, the little round, kind of roundish looking place there off to the side of it on the left. And you see that tiny little green line in between them, that little bitty green line. That is called Bahar Yosef. And I'll tell you what, if that little green line was not there, that big oasis would not be there. It's wild. Let's look at that oasis a little closer. This is what it looks like a little closer. Tons and tons of agriculture. And those big splotches on there, those are cities. Those are big, big cities. Really big cities. It's really wild. Out in the middle of nowhere. It's wild. Why in the world do they have this oasis out in the middle of nowhere? It's because the Nile was feeding through this canal, this tiny canal that's 15 miles long. It's not that long, but it's pretty long. 15 miles long. and it goes to this place. And you go a little closer and you can see, oh my, it's really, really dense. There's a lot of people living there. Go figure, out in the middle of nowhere. If they didn't have that canal, if they didn't have that Nile, so you can see down there at the bottom, Bar Yosef. This is where the canal feeds in, the Nile to the Bar Yosef canal to this oasis. Now, what we want to see here is how does this fit in with Joseph as the living water? Oops. You'll see here that this Bar Yosef, let's go back just a little bit so you can get an idea. The little line there, the little green line in between the Nile, the green long line, and then the little line, and then the big green splotch. That little canal, that little line in between is called Bar Yosef, or better translated to Canal of Joseph, which is a wild thought because Joseph is a bit more Hebrew than anything else. Why do they have this canal that everybody calls Bar Yosef, Canal of Joseph, out in Egypt? Joseph in Egypt. Maybe we know why. I think we might know. Could he be also considered the living water, as Jesus was considered the living water? Let's look at it. He fed this place. This place would not be here without that canal, let me tell you what. 15 miles long. This place is 700 square miles. It's big. John 4:14 says, whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst again. Wow. And those people certainly needed water, most definitely. Indeed, Joseph represented Jesus perfectly in this story, being the bread of life as he was giving bread. He was giving the corn to all the people. The bread of life and the water of life both. If you believe that that canal is indeed the canal that Joseph built. It's extravagant, it really is, and there's tons. It branches off all over the place once it gets to the oasis. It feeds that oasis. It's so lush. I think it fits well. Bar Yosef, Canal of Joseph. Okay, let's look at another one. There's another one, fun one coming up here, and then we'll be finished, and Grandpa's going to share some good stuff. But first, both tombs were emptied. Indeed, they were. Look at Jesus' tomb. So they ran both together, both stooping, Peter and the other one stooping down and looking into the sepulcher. They saw the linen clothes lying, yet Jesus was gone. He was gone. He was out and about. He was gone. What about Joseph? Was his tomb empty? And Joseph took an oath this long time ago to the children of Israel, Joseph, saying, God will surely visit you later on, and he shall carry up my bones from here. And so Joseph died, being 110, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. So his bones would still be there, right? No. So were his bones ever removed? Or are they still there? I don't know. Both tombs were empty. Let's look at this a little closer. This is the fun thought. We want to see if, is the tomb empty? Jesus' tomb was empty. Was Joseph's tomb empty? We're going to get to it in a roundabout way. But you'll see clearly that it clearly was. There is an interesting excavation done in this place called Avaris. A lot of people say this has nothing to do with, our story we're talking about right now, Joseph. Doesn't have anything to do with it. But there is an amazing place there. Now, you look down south, and you'll see where that oasis was. And you come up north to Avaris. That whole area is the delta where it's really lush. It's a really, really good place there. Avaris. Let's look at Avaris a little bit. In this excavation, they found deep in the ground, because it's been thousands of years, they found this place. It's this is a blueprint. This is just a simple blueprint. And one of the interesting thoughts you might have is that those are pillars there, circles. On the top are 12. On the bottom are 12. Sides are 3. Is there significance? I don't know. That's just a fun thought. 12, 12, 12 brothers, 12 tribes, 12 disciples, on and on. But if you look at it a little closer, you can see this is kind of what they think it looked like. They said it was a massive palace. It was amazing. This is in Avaris, an excavation done really recently. Really cool looking, real nice. An Egyptian palace or Egyptian style. It was built more like a Canaanite place. Interesting. And you see in the back, look a little closer, you can see these little round looking buildings. Like his backyard, I don't know. But those little round buildings are tombs. It's really wild. He's got tombs back there, bunch of tombs. Don't know how many tombs, but it seems that there are 12 or more. Look at that a little closer. You look a little closer in that little backyard, I say. Look a little closer and you see this, all the tombs, tombs in the back of this palace. An amazing palace. Does you see anything interesting there? There's something interesting there. There's a pyramid there. Why is there a pyramid in this guy's backyard? I don't know, but here's an idea. You go a little closer, and here it is. It's a pyramid. It is actually a tomb. It's actually got a statue in it. Pretty wild. And it's right behind this massive palace that's built like a Canaanite palace. It's really interesting because all the places around this, they say, were Egyptian-style homes, and yet there were Canaanites who died there. And they say that because they were buried like Canaanites. They had Canaanite furniture, Canaanite weapons, Canaanite, everything, items and whatnot. And so they say, there were Egyptian homes, and yet there were Canaanites living there. You got to remember, this is also on the east side of the delta there, so it's close to a lot of the people, Canaan and whatnot, coming over there, which would also make sense for the story as it goes, that inside there's a statue in there. Now you got to remember, this is really, really old, and inside the statue is a little beat. In fact, it's so beat that it's broken. Okay, there's like nothing left. So they're trying to reconstruct this. So this is a fun idea, okay? Is it true? I'm not sure. Does it all point to the story of Joseph? You can decide. Let's look at it. Inside, this is their reconstruction of this guy. He has a multicolored robe. He has a, what do you call it, an ankh or something or other. And in one hand, he has this staff. Represents, a sign of office. He's he's a pretty important guy. Maybe he was the guy who owned this palace, this amazing palace out here. He has pale skin, which they say represents a foreigner, not an Egyptian. He has this wild mushroom hairdo that excavators say fits the Canaanite kind of people, the foreigners. It's also orange hair for whatever reason. Foreigner. Let's look at this picture here. Okay, so this is about as much as they found. Okay, kind of sad. So they reconstructed a whole lot, but boy, they certainly think they found something. So it's just an interesting thought. You see the mushroom head down there on the bottom. Somebody hit it. The eyes have been gouged out, which is an interesting thought, because in the Exodus, people certainly would have been quite upset with Moses, maybe with Joseph. You never know. Maybe they gouged out his eyeballs on here. If this was Joseph, right? That's what I'm trying to say. His hairstyle's wild. It's mushroom style like a Canaanite. He's got the throwing stick for an office, pale skin, defaced. It says, is this the damaged head of Joseph's statue? I don't know. And this is what they tried to say it might have looked like. The shortened shepherd's staff, or crook, It was a symbol of state power for high officials, and many times on a sarcophagus. So whoever this guy was, he was very important. One of the interesting points is that the excavators try to say that there's paint, there's orange paint on his head, he's pale skin, and he has a coat of many colors. The paint shows that he has stripes. And they says, this is so bizarre for an Egyptian officer. This doesn't make any sense. Was it Joseph? I don't know. Never know. There were no bones there. But let's look at that. Why were there no bones there? See, any of this doesn't necessarily matter. But the next part matters. Guess what? They found no bones in the entire tomb. You're right. That's right. Did somebody go sell the bones? Did somebody use the bones? Did somebody eat the bones? Or, like Jesus' bones, which were missing from his tomb, did Joseph go home too? To Canaan. Do I mean he went to heaven? No, he didn't go to heaven. Yep, not then. He didn't die and go to heaven. But indeed, let's look at it. Finally, both went to the promised land. This is the point I'm making. The tomb of Jesus was emptied. Was Joseph's tomb emptied? Well, it says in Exodus 13:19, you could have just looked it up, I suppose. And Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had straitly sworn the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones away hence with you. So in the Exodus, they grabbed his bones and they took off. So indeed, Joseph's tomb was empty too. And he was taken where? The promised land. Just like Jesus to the promised land. That's right. So it fits perfectly. Was it his palace? Don't know. Doesn't matter, but it's pretty interesting. And here's Jesus. And when he had spoken these things, while they beheld, he was taken up, and a cloud received him out of their sight. So it went from the beginnings of their lives to the ends, or the beginning, the end, beginning of the end. They both made it to the promised land. It's amazing. So indeed, Joseph's bones, they made it to the promised land of Canaan. Indeed, Jesus' bones made it to the promised land in heaven. That's what we're trying to get. And indeed, our bones too will inherit the heavenly promised land one day as well. Oh, yes, they will. Does God and his Son write the most beautiful true stories? He does. He wrote this story. Both of them. It's amazing. Isn't Passover the most perfect time to remember these stories? I thought maybe it was. How this all-knowing God still sacrificed his Son for us. And who was that man that gave his life for all humanity? We read it a little bit. Jesus, who was the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of every creature. For by him were all things created, that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible, invisible, whether it be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and for him. And he is before all things. And by him all things consist. Most definitely. And this is where we're headed, the same place. Amen?